All right, hello GovCon. Welcome to Keep Your Database Clutter-Free, use Views CSV Source. So just a little bit about me. I am Drupal lead for JSI. So I lead a small team of developers who focus on building Drupal websites. I've been in the Drupal community since around 2010, but I've only been on Drupal.org for 13 years at the username andileco. I'm probably most known as the maintainer for the charts module that I'm always on social media talking about, and I was also involved in getting Drupal certified as a digital public good. So JSI, our mission is we're dedicated to improving lives through better health and education outcomes for individuals and communities, and to providing an environment where people of passion can pursue this cause. JSI is dedicated to strengthening health and education systems to improve the lives of individuals, families, and communities. We believe people should have what they need to live their healthiest lives and to reach their full potential. To accomplish this, JSI works hand in hand with government agencies, community organizations, and the private sector to design pragmatic strategies for complex problems. We drive measurable impact in public health, healthcare, and education to enhance well-being of people in the United States and around the world. As a global organization, we have designed, delivered, and scaled programs in more than 50 countries. We also have worked in evaluation, training, and technical assistance, policy and strategy in all 50 states, and we have teams in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, DC, Georgia, Colorado, and California, as well as 4 affiliate organizations based in Kenya, Zambia, India, and the Netherlands. So here are some of the clients and partners that we have, and since this is GovCon, I wanted to just draw your attention. We do work with government agencies. JSI has built a reputation of excellence among our partners and clients. We deliver world-class results through exceptional partnerships, technical insights, context alignment, and adaptive thinking. And here are some of our strengths. Okay, so I've outlined what we'll discuss today, and I'm hoping this presentation will appeal to people who are managing people, processes, and content, as well as people who are more interested in kind of the underpinnings of the module. To start, I'll provide a basic overview of the Views CSV Source module, how it can be used to declutter your whole content management system space. And next we'll look at some common needs or use cases that are handled by this module. We'll discuss why and how this should be built in Drupal. And at that point, I'll provide a comparison of the standard Drupal approach versus the approach that's enabled by Views CSV Source. Next, I'm going to take you on a deep dive into some of the technical aspects of the module. And then from there, I'm going to share some examples that you can download and import into your own site. And I think these will be worth waiting for. I'll wrap up by discussing the future direction of the module and also take some questions. Okay, so let's get started. The Views CSV Source module is a contributed Drupal module that allows a view to query a CSV file rather than a database. So call it laziness or a drive for efficiency. But either way, I was getting very tired of configuring content types and fields just to bring content into my sites for purposes of visualization. I found the Views JSON Source module, and I made basically just a clone of that module that worked for CSV files instead. However, I quickly realized that the module the way it wasn't built for aggregating data, and that's when I called in my colleague Nia to help refactor the code. The module, which we've now contributed, works with pretty much any views format. It can be aggregated, filtered, sorted, paginated, and summarized. And it works with other view-specific modules like View Simple Math Field, Views Fields On-Off, and others. Okay, quick poll. Who knows about the KonMari method? Can you tell me a little bit more?
Only do what brings you joy. Basically,
Yeah.
It comes down to like organizing your life, which by the way she gave up during the pandemic because she had kids.
I heard about that after I finished my presentation, but yeah. So the idea, if you didn't hear that or for the recording, is basically Marie Kondo, who became popular in about 2019 for her reality show, has this system where to declutter your house, you take everything and you look at it. If it sparks joy, then you keep it, and if it doesn't, then you get rid of it. And this presentation is it's about a module, but it's really meant to kind of think about decluttering your whole content management system, and ultimately maybe make your web development life a little more joyful. Because I found that, like a house, things do get really cluttered working with the content management system. Thankfully, there are actually 3 different ways that this module can help you declutter. One is by decluttering your processes, another is by decluttering your content strategy, and lastly, your technology. So let's go through each. Oops. So Drupal is a content management system, yes, but you do end up managing a lot more than content. People, processes, permissions. In my experience, because we were all sort of raised on Microsoft Office, we often default to using a spreadsheet for organizing information, and sometimes collaborating as well. And rather than prying Excel from our colleagues' fingers and trying to make them become Drupal content managers, we can just meet them where they are. Views CSV Source allows you to say, okay, prepare everything in an Excel, and then give me an export. And that simple sentence can cut down a lot of unnecessary management of people, processes, and permissions. Another area that's at risk of getting cluttered is your content strategy. As we will see in the common needs section later on in this presentation, there are many reasons that clients may want a dynamic widget that's best served by the Views module. But this can affect your content strategy in negative ways. So what is content strategy? It's basically the approach that you take to getting the right content to the right people at the right time. It's a little bit like organizing a supply chain for your content, and that's why I included this little image from the JSI Supply Chain Manager's Handbook. I also like to think of it in very simple terms of what is your website supposed to do, and then don't get distracted by flashy things. The Views CSV Source module can also help you declutter from a technical perspective. If you start adding a new entity type every time you want a new feature, you can quickly end up with a crowded administrative interface and a bloated database. And we'll talk about why this is a problem a little bit later. Right now, I just wanted to point out this image. So this was the only image that I could find for the idea of having too many tables. And then when I looked closely, I saw lots of tables for lots of Drupalers. It was actually from an event in 2009, so clearly this has been a problem for a long time now. Okay, so we spoke about, in broad terms, about what Views CSV Source can do. Now I want to dig into the types of scenarios in which it can be especially helpful. I have several slides of common needs broken out by sector, like higher education, nonprofits, and businesses, but since this is GovCon, I just focused on the government ones for now. If you want to look at any of the other ones later on, we can. So here are a few broad categories of what governments do, with examples how those may materialize in a website. So for open data and transparency, you could have a city government that has a crime blog, and they want to include some interactive visuals that are using crime statistic data that come from a separate system. In the realm of kind of budget forecasting, you may have some sort of forward-looking report where you want to use data from, again, a separate system, but do some sort of forecasting on what the costs of employee salaries would be for a specific department. In the public health realm, which is kind of my realm, you may be wanting to do a retrospective analysis on how your municipality or state or whatever handled the COVID pandemic. So what do these needs have in common? They're bits of content that could be one of the following: either dynamic, interactive, or data intensive. Dynamic meaning that the data may change often to the point where it's less appealing to create it as just pure HTML. Interactive meaning that it has some ability to be sorted or filtered or searched through, and data intensive meaning that it has too much content to make it feasible to just code that. So those are just a few examples that I cooked up. I'm sure there are many more, and I'd love to hear your ideas about this later. But now you may be thinking, okay, but should those actually be built in Drupal? And how would that look with and without Views CSV Source? So I'm going to talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of kind of the standard approach and the approach using Views CSV Source. But first, let's talk about why build these features in Drupal. I was actually kind of impressed by the number of reasons that I could come up with to like why you might want to build something like this in Drupal. Because you might immediately be going to like, oh, we should use a product like Tableau or Power BI or Airtable. There are a lot of strong reasons to use it to build it in Drupal, though. One of the first and foremost would just be, you have 0 license fees and 0 user fees at any scale. This is a huge benefit, as some of these services, will charge you a license fee, and then you have to pay for additional users. Seamless theming is another one, because if you're embedding one of these things in an iframe, it's very hard to get your styles to exactly match, and you may not even have that many options in terms of how you can style that outside service. For unified authentication and permissions, you don't need to manage users and permissions for another system. In this case, like with the views, you have the option to only allow like one role to see the view, for example. So you can kind of sync with what Drupal already provides you when it comes to roles and permissions. And trying to sync like all of your users and all of your permissions to other system is just a huge headache. You also benefit from improved performance and caching. So a Drupal module can leverage the site's built-in cache. The process data can be cached on the server, leading to very fast load times for end users, where an embedded BI widget may have to load its entire application library and query a separate service, and you may actually notice, at least on an initial load, some level of slowdown. For data governance and privacy, sometimes you want all your data hosted on your own site and not stored in an additional server. This also makes it easier to control your data and also know that it's not being used for some other purpose that's buried in the terms and conditions. Handling unowned or untrusted data sources. So with Drupal, you have a lot of control over how your data is handled. Even with the Views CSV Source module, we have an option where you can say, like, this is trusted HTML, and so the CSV text that's like written as HTML, so it has HTML tags in it, it will display as HTML if you want it. Otherwise, you can just leave it as kind of raw text. And then, of course, Views has lots of sanitization functions that go on in the background. Like, I don't know if any of you ever tried to like add an SVG on a view. And then also, with firewall and network security, if you have to connect to outside services, this just sort of expands your attack surface. And sometimes, using one of these tools for something that's relatively small is just overkill. You don't need to like have Tableau to do like a fun little chart. And then it also empowers your content editors, because a lot of times they've already created views in the past. They know how to do that, and they don't have to learn any new skills. You don't have to go through this huge learning curve like you've already done with Drupal to learn Tableau or Power BI or some other system. So we've established that there are lots of good reasons to build this in Drupal, but what are the modules that you might want to use to do that? Oftentimes it's going to be views and modules that extends views. So I listed several that I maintain myself, like the charts, view simple math field, and views on off. There's also views flipped table. That's one I like to use a lot. And then there are mapping solutions as well. The leaflet one, I noticed there was a little bit of an issue with that one, because it's at least the latest version wants you to have a sort of an entity-based geofield. But you can use the charts, high charts map module, which I also maintain, for a similar purpose. And you'll actually see that in one of the examples. So how do we achieve this feature? There's the standard entity-based approach, and then there's the Views CSV Source approach. So I'm going to just discuss the standard approach for now. With this approach, you would typically create a content type or another entity type, such as the storage module. Storage entities module, I guess the storage entity type. And if you're using vocabularies, then you need to add vocabularies. You need to add taxonomy terms inside those vocabularies. You have to manage the fields. You have to make sure the permissions are correct. And then to get the content into your site, you have to use something like setting up a feeds importer, using a migrate plugin, or using the content import module. And then once you have the content in your site, you can build your view. It's a lot of steps, and I don't want to malign the typical Drupal content management approach. I mean, it's worked extremely well for, more than 2 decades and for lots and lots of people, but there are situations like we're talking about today where it poses some drawbacks. So I'm going to outline them here. The first one is really time. Just you saw with that last slide, the number of steps required leads to more time. There are permission considerations. Adding entities can also clutter your content strategy and database, as I hinted at earlier. And the views you produce can also quickly run against performance issues. So time. I'm not necessarily proud of this, but I have in the past created an entity with probably more than 50 fields. And it worked well for my situation. It was related to tuberculosis data, and there were lots and lots of indicators. But it was very tedious to set up that entity type. And because it took a little bit longer to set up, it cost a little bit more. Each field takes 2 screens to set up, and yes, you can do some of this in Drush, but not every site has somebody who knows how to use Drush at that level. Also, when adding new fields to an entity, you have to be considerate about your field vocabulary and taxonomy term names, so that you're not making things confusing for other content managers. And then if you're mapping, like if you're importing your data, then you have to map from like your source column in your file to the field in your data. That takes a long time as well, so it just gets really painful. On the permissions side, when you're adding content that's really just intended to supplement other content in your site and be displayed within a view, you do have to consider, do you want people to just be going to like the individual node page or the individual storage page? The storage entities module does have a way for you to prevent people directly accessing those pages, and there's the rabbit hole module that will also block you from going to individual node pages of a certain type. But it's just like one more step that you need to do. So content strategy. Once you start down the path of polluting your content strategy, it's a slippery slope. Before you know it, you have 25 content types and 60 vocabularies. You're spending all your time on the flashy new thing instead of focusing on your core business. You have views with names you don't even know. You've reached Drupal rock bottom. Database clutter is another issue that you'll run against. So when you're adding lots of entity types and fields, you're first and foremost creating entity base tables. Each entity has a base table that holds the fundamental information about the entity, such as its ID, bundle, and other core properties. And then when you add fields, you're also adding a new table for each one of those fields. And this leads to database bloat. While modern databases can handle lots of tables, having lots of tables makes direct database inspection and management more cumbersome. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, your administrative interface is also a little bit more cluttered. Another problem is that you're putting a lot of stuff into your database that doesn't necessarily need to be there, and so you're also having to pay more for database storage or potentially for your database hosting. On the performance side, a non-aggregated view with fields loads every entity to get the field values. In my experience, for sites that have kind of a basic hosting plan, like with Pantheon, you can maybe get up to like 600 nodes displayed at one time without a pager. And if you're having, additional relationships in your view, it might not even be able to get to 600. Aggregation does help significantly, but that's not going to be an appropriate thing to do for all the different use cases you might have. All right, so now let's examine the Views CSV Source approach. In this case, it's really 1 or 2 steps. You upload your CSV file to your site, or you locate a remote CSV file, and then you create your view. That's it. What are the advantages? So conversely to the standard approach, you can save a lot of time with this because you're skipping all of those steps. The module supports local and remote files. It offers workflow enhancements. It doesn't clutter your content strategy or your database, and it performs very well in comparison to entity-based views in terms of performance. So when you use Views CSV Source, you immediately focus on the data that you have and the display that you want to create, rather than thinking about much about content management. In this way, it's more similar to a business intelligence tool. The benefit from the time perspective is basically like the view is going to take the same time to build no matter what, but you don't have to have any of those steps leading up to it. Remote data, in cases where data frequently update, it can definitely make sense to connect to a remote file rather than uploading a file to your site. Views CSV Source natively supports this, and it also supports using basic authentication to access that file. So that you're not constantly requesting the remote resource, Views CSV Source allows you to set a cache duration and then saves a string copy of the CSV to your cache. This helps with performance unless the cache is too big, in which case you can set the duration to 0 and the site will not cache that file. Workflow enhancements. While Drupal does have a reasonable user interface, some people just excel at using Excel. Or you may be wanting data from a remote system, as we've already talked about, and this cuts out the need to import the data first. When we can connect to a file versus introducing a new Drupal content management workflow, this helps us swim with the tide rather than working against it. Content strategy, when you view the widget that you're creating as just like an enhancement of your other content, then it's not really sort of moving away from your existing content strategy. It's just working to improve engagement. And database hygiene. Using Views CSV Source allows us to avoid unnecessary tables in our database and needing to do expensive joins during queries. Yes, there's still going to be content in your caches, but this has a minimal impact on your database inspection. And your database has been set up to handle caches already. For performance, another great thing that this module does is it integrates with League CSV PHP library, which allows you to stream data from a CSV, and it allows us to render tens of thousands of data points or tens of thousands of rows at a time. All right, so I've provided you some benefits of Views CSV Source, but so far I haven't spoken much about the features or what's under the hood, so I'd like to spend a few minutes doing a deep dive on the module's internals. Our dive plan will be to start with the Drupal database API and how Views CSV Source is able to query without SQL. Then I'll talk about a JSON query object that we designed for processing a query with PHP. Then we'll discuss how the module approaches aggregation, and we'll end by talking about some of the constraints or drawbacks inherent in the module. I'm seeing that I'm getting a little bit low on time, so I'm going to go through this relatively quickly. If anyone's really wanting to learn more, we can come back to this. So basically, we have a few different Drupal classes that are used when doing a dynamic or a select query. That includes the connection class and the select class. And then Views also has a query plugin, and this query plugin it doesn't have to be SQL, but it's really designed for SQL because all the handlers that feed into it are assuming SQL. So we had to handle all of these components. So we We created our own connection class, our own select class, and our own query plugin base. Okay, so we're at the second dive spot. One of the innovations of this module was writing a JSON-based query syntax that we could have PHP interpret. If you've gone into the settings for views and you've selected the little box that says, view the query above the views preview, when you look at that now, you'll see something sort of similar to this, where you'll be able to kind of read through the JSON and see what's happening. And then I'm actually going to skip these slides just for the sake of time to get to the examples. Okay, so some bottlenecks and trade-offs. We talked a lot about the benefits, but some of the trade-offs that we should mention first, rather than having the web server and the database sharing tasks, this module is placing the entire load on your web server. Your web server may not like that. We're also expecting PHP to do things that SQL happens to do very efficiently, like summing or averaging data. Second, loading too many rows into your HTML page can also create a giant blob for your database to try to cache. This would be the same thing if you tried to have an entity-based view load 100,000 rows, but it would never even approach being able to do that. So it's not an issue with normal views. Third, if we enable a cache duration for remote files, then we do read the entire contents of the CSV into memory before processing it, and this can max out your memory and cause the page to fail. There is a ticket for this to offer different solutions, so being able to either stream the file or use the in-memory cache. Okay, so to the examples now. So this first one is showing a kind of a small multiples style heat map. That's this is data from Chicago's data portal. It's a CSV with more than 100,000 rows. It's just 2 views displays to handle this, and that's the link to the GitHub page that has all the instructions and the configuration for that. This next one is for budget forecasting. So I'm using View Simple Math Field to take the annual salary data over there and just multiply it by 1.03 if everyone's getting like a standard 3% increase to get the projected salaries. I'm also using views fields on off so that if you don't want to include, if you want to download this and you don't want the department and the job title, you can unselect those 2 columns and it'll show you a table with only name, salary, and projected salary. And then the last example is COVID-19 cases, also from Chicago's. Actually, all these are from the Chicago data portal. And this one is using charts and the charts chart.js submodule. Again, you can see there's a lot of data points there. I'm happy to stay back and show the view configuration for any of those. But the beautiful thing about this module is because the data is in a file, all you have to do is get the file somewhere where the view knows where to find it and import the view configuration to get that entire thing. You don't have to do anything else really. Like with the charts module, you do have to set up your default library. Just that's one setting page. That's just a normal part of installing that module. But otherwise, you can just
I was just saying, this seems like a great opportunity where you have someone that's updating a spreadsheet all the time, wanting to drop it on to show constant doing instead of having to go in and change the view every time and find those nodes. They just drop in a new spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So just the future directions, real quick. I want to enable users to select whether they can use the file streaming or in-memory loading. I'd like to be able to add additional authentication options beyond just the basic authentication, so that if you have a system that wants to use something else, you can use that and maybe make it more like a plugin. Better date handling. So we as I prepped for this presentation, we added a new filter plugin for numeric fields. So we can treat any of what was normally string data as numbers, and then do like greater than or in between types of comparisons. And we can also do that with date handling. It's just building a plugin. And then I'd like to have some sort of documentation of like how, when you're writing your content in a node page, like how do you bring in view data, or like create a view and then bring in view data. There are ways to do that. There's like entity embed and entity views embed. I've used that as an example I can show you for a long form site that has multiple interactive charts directly in the CK editor fields. And those are based on views. And then I'd also be kind of interested to see, with AI, if we could just, drop a CSV file into your chatbot and then say, hey, build me a view with the following columns from the CSV, and see what it does with that. We already have a charts AI agent that can build a chart from a chatbot, but this would be kind of taking it to the next level by like being able to drop the data source in there as well. So we have -1 minute for questions.
Does that go till 3?
Oh, it does. Okay.
You have all the time for questions.
I have a lot of time for questions. All right, we can go back. Thank you. Yeah, let's take questions, and then if you want, I can go to like show you my views backend.
Did you show that?
Yes. If I can figure out the second data or the second desktop. Okay, so this is just the 2 displays that I mentioned. We have one that I've titled map. So let me go there first. And the first thing with Views CSV Source, when you get started with the module, as soon as you start your view, you add it as a CSV based view rather than content. And then the first thing you do is you go to query settings and you put the path to your CSV file. So this can be a local path. You can even, it'll allow you to it'll autocomplete for file entities in your system, and it can also be a remote path. If you have a CSV that has 2 or 3 kind of levels before the actual content, you can use this header offset. You can pass headers for basic authentication, and then you can use different request methods, and we have an option to show errors as well. So once you've done that, then you go to your fields. It comes with a field by default, and we have this column selector. So these are all the columns that are in that CSV file. So I've just selected, I can't read that.
Okay. Case number.
Yeah, number of cases. So this is talking about crime in Chicago, so number of crimes essentially. And then in this case, I also pulling in the ward column, and I'm using this for grouping. And then I'm doing a count of the number of crimes. And then in my views format, I've selected the high charts, or the high maps format. And then this one's a little bit complicated. The charting library is high map, the charting type is map. You use the ward, which is going to be your sort of geographical label as the label field, and then the number of crimes provides the data. And then to get the boundary data into your view, there's a section here called map data settings. So you can either point to a JSON file somewhere, or you can create a taxonomy with a term, with a field that holds JSON data that you just pasted into that field. This is probably the better solution. This is the second solution that we came up with. So if you've used this module before, this is relatively new. And then you also have to kind of know a little bit about the JSON that you're looking at, as well as the data that you have. Luckily, with the View export, all this is set up for you. Really, all you have to do is take the CSV file and place it, rename it, and place it in site default settings for the example to work. But the other thing that I've done here is, like I said, Views CSV Source has like filters, sorts, contextual filters. You can use pagination. So we have added a contextual filter for primary type. So this is like a type of crime like battery, theft, etc. And then in the other display, the grid, the query settings is the same. We've aggregated this view by primary type. Oh yeah, so we just aggregated it, we grouped it by primary type, and then we are also using the views field view lazy load module, which is pulling in the map display. And this is just a grid. So when I go to this page, so I've visited this page before, so it's loading pretty quickly, but this data set is over 100,000 rows big, and you can see, like, you can hover over it. So that was the one example. I'm going to do this employee salaries first. Again, the first thing is always the query settings. There's my file. And then these are it's a table display. These are the various columns I've added. And then, sorry, I can't see very well. Yeah, so I have the view simple math field here. So in this one, I've taken a custom text field. I didn't use the annual salary field because the data actually start with a $sign. So you can't really perform math equations on it, right? So I have a global text, custom text field where I basically just strip that off using Twig. And then in here, I add this token, and then I do the multiplication times 1.03. So that's what gives me the projected, and I wanted to point out, you can round it, you can use a precision, you can say what kind of decimal point you want, and you can say which thousand separator you want as well. So this is from View Simple Math Field module, and then this is the Views Field On/Off module has either a field plugin or a filter plugin. They essentially do the same thing, but what you do is you can select the columns that you want to be toggled, and then you can select like how you want people to be able to toggle them, and whether or not you want them enabled by default, like showing up by default or not.
Did you show the rewrite you did with the custom text?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just using the replace function.
Mm-hmm. And then, just so you can see how it's kind of dynamic, so if I take out department and job title and apply, those are gone.
I heard you say you talking about downloading this? So is there a download option that you built here so someone else can just customize and download CSV?
You should be able to use, I think you can use Views data export. There's also another module that my team built that is intended for like table displays, and it's more of like downloading from the front end.
Yeah.
So I'll try to remember the name of that one. If you go to my user profile, you'll find it. But that's a very helpful one. I kind of like it more. The only issue is if you have a paginated view, it only downloads like what's in the first when you open the view. And then this one. Oh, a point to make is, I did that rewrite in Views, but you could also potentially just like take that CSV file and just strip out the $, using an Excel function, and then resave it as a CSV and upload it.
Do you know if that, because we had talked about being able to, append the URL variable to download from a Google spreadsheet.
Yes.
Can you do that function on the Google spreadsheet, and would that convert for the CSV download?
That's a good question. So the question was, can you take so one of the things you can do with this is, when I said remote file, that can also be a Google Sheet. There's an option to publish to the web, and then if you add a query parameter, you can have that download as a CSV file versus like an XLMS or something else. I haven't tried that, but that's definitely, that would be interesting to see for sure. Yeah, I haven't tried anything that has a formula in it. I don't know yet. That's a good question though. Okay, so this one, kind of similar to the map in that, again, query settings, I'm just pointing to CSV file, and then I have a chart format. I've selected chart.js. Align. The date is the label field, otherwise known as the x-axis. And then these are each different columns from the CSV data. I can give them different colors. And I wanted to just say with the charts module, the best practice is to bring in the JavaScript libraries into your site, into like the libraries folder. But that's a challenge for people, and so we also have an option in the advanced settings for the charts module to allow for, if the library doesn't exist in your local file system, it will just bring the files in via the CDN. And so that's one of the ways that you can get started directly on charts, like using like Project Browser or something like that, where you might not have access to Composer. Yeah. Any questions?
Yeah, so I guess just looking at the performance of it, like this chart right here was pulling from a data set. You pull that full data set, and like how many rows roughly was that one, like for COVID?
Yeah, good point. So the employee salary one. Yeah. Is that 3,000?
32,000.
Yeah, so 32,000 for that one, and then for the COVID one.
Oh, that's for Chicago.
Just for Chicago, yeah. This one wasn't too many actually. Yeah, but the crime one was the most.
Yeah. Because my project hosts the one nationally for COVID, so it's not.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
This would not be a good option for that. I would say use like the Charts API instead.
right, but in terms of just pulling down that data, let's say you wanted to have a very large data set that you weren't going to render directly, but at least use Views as the querying engine to slice a manageable piece piece, you still start with that big of a. How would you go
you
about-
can use that, and there are some drawbacks. And actually, let me go back to the back end of these views for a second. Oh, and we're at time already. Not this one. Let's do- So this is actually going to be interesting to people, I think. So one of the filters options that we have is called CSV field options. So if you select this, it actually has the ability to narrow down to like only the data that's included in your file. So if you've used this like a select option with like a vocabulary, unless you use another module, it's just going to have every single taxonomy term in that vocabulary versus the ones that actually have data attached to them. Whereas this one actually only provides the values that are in your data source. And that's just by default with this module. The problem is if you try to use this on a data source that's really, really big, trying to get this filter to open up is going to crash your view.
Yeah, so I wouldn't.
Yeah,
I
so
would
just
think more
stay away from this one.
Right.
There's a text filter one that you can use, and there's the numeric filter one that you can use, but this one would be problematic in that case.
Would it be reasonable just in the context of like passing all those things in a URL and maybe my main view display is a data export, so I'm not actually interacting with the form to filter stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just passing in a large query string, doing the things I want, and then you're using your the query, the select that you overrode in order to process that.
Yeah, I think it's worth a shot. Come talk to me later. I'd be happy to, discuss on Slack or something like that.
Just so you know, you can use those formulas. It's it creates the CSV at the export. It
Okay.
creates sum and also concatenating it work fine.
Nice. Okay. Thank you for trying that out.
That was quick.
Yeah. The fact that you could just do that is nice. All right. I think we have actually hit time. Thank you so much for coming.